I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's 6:30. My name is Adam Gretzinger. I'm the chair of the Highland NAC. I'd like to welcome everybody. We're going to do introductions, but real quickly, this NAC is a city-sponsored community involvement operation, and we have a bunch of folks here from the city and also our volunteer board members. I live in Highland. I've lived here for about 3 years, and I'm currently the chair. And let's have our other board members introduce themselves, starting with Konnette, then Annie.
I'm Konnette Etheridge. I've been living here for 19 years, I guess now, and I am the recorder and also the BCCI representative.
Hi, I'm Annie. I am our treasurer, and I also handle any of our social media outreach and connect with people on social media when they have questions about the NAC. And my husband and I have lived here for about 2.5 years, and the NAC has been a great introduction to the Highland neighborhood for us.
Reggie and then Ryan.
Hi, I'm Reggie Frumkin, and I'm the vice chair of the Highland NAC. I've lived in the neighborhood my whole life, with the exception of a few years in the mid-2010s. And it's great to be here. Thanks, everyone, for coming out.
Is it me now? Hi, I'm Ryan Zager. I've lived in the neighborhood for 3 years, and I am a board member.
Okay, thank you. Miles, Kate, Liana, Officer Barrett, and Sergeant, however that is said, could you introduce yourselves?
I'm Miles Glowacki. I'm the neighborhood program coordinator for the city.
I'll go next. Denisha Barrett, police officer with the city of Beaverton, NAC representative.
This is Liana. I'm with Tualatin Hills Parks and Recreation District, and I work in community engagement.
I'm Sergeant Ed Master-Polito with Beaverton Police, and I supervise the mountain bike team.
Okay. Kate, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, just a resident, not a panelist. So I'm a resident volunteer that's involved in the neighborhood NAC.
Okay. I think we have a caller that wants to speak. Is that? It's *6 to unmute yourself for the person who's on the phone who had their hand raised. Okay, we'll just continue. That might be Juanita, another board member. Just diving into our agenda, which is displayed on the screen here. We have a few administrative things to do before we get into our police and special district updates. We have the December meeting minutes that the chair will entertain a motion to approve. They have been prepared by our recorder. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as written?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Adam, we do have a quorum.
Yes. Looks like we're only missing 2 board members. Okay, Annie, could you give the treasurer's report?
Sure. It's the actual report is fairly short. So last month we discussed that there was an issue with being charged $5 by the Oregonians Credit Union for dipping below the balance, which has since been corrected because we are a nonprofit organization, so they don't actually charge us for that. So we did. They did refund us that $5. So we got the deposit of the $5 refund, and going forward, that's not going to be an issue. And we also had a deposit from the reimbursement from the city for the shredding event of $1,192.48. We only had 2 charges in December. One of them was for $63.12, and that was to a resident who had spent her own money for the shredding event, and I wrote her a check to reimburse her for that. And I have all the receipts from her. And then also an $84 expense related to the tree planting event, which I also have a receipt for. So that brings our whole balance to $1,379.85. I am still working on the reimbursement for the matching grant for the tree planting event. So once I finish that and once we get the money back from the city, our balance will be higher, which kind of brings me to a question that I have for Adam and for Miles. So since I'm taking over as treasurer, there's still a few pieces that I'm learning. But my question is in terms of having expenses. For example, we have the tree planting event coming up at the end of January, and we've gotten board approval for the matching grant with kind of a general budget for that. So as we want to spend money on that, do we need to have motions with the specific dollar amount and exactly what's getting spent before that money gets spent?
Yes, there should be a motion to approve a rough dollar amount, not a specific dollar amount.
Okay, so
and the purpose.
And the purpose. So since in October, for example, Reggie made the motion of the match that, we're going to be doing this tree planting event and proposed a rough budget. Do we need to make any other specific motions of now we're going to spend $1,000 on trees, or is that?
As long as it fits in the amount requested.
Okay. Sounds good.
If it exceeds it, then we should have a motion.
Then we should have a motion
before you reimburse it.
Okay, that's really helpful. Part of what I'm trying to do is kind of just have a better note taking so that we can actually say, okay, this money was approved at this point. And a little bit too of just with the debit card as treasurer, kind of hold on to it a little bit more, and before giving it off to other people, have a little bit more of a discussion of what's going to be spent on the card. Because one of the things that with all of these events back to back, and then it takes us some time to get reimbursed from the city, and we're all busy, and it takes us some time to get everything put together. Our balance is a little bit lower, and so we just need to be conscious of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go. I'm about to drop my email and Konnette's email into the chat box. And the purpose of this is if anybody needs to contact board members about stuff we discussed during the meeting or send information, that can be done. So that's just in case anything, anybody wants to send anything for inclusion in the minutes or follow up with anything from tonight's meeting. And those are in the chat. We've been asked to do that by others in the city. Liana, could you take over now with the parks update, and I can stop sharing if you have something to share.
Yes, I would be happy to. Thank you. I don't have anything in particular to share. Just share these out verbally. Just a little bit of news from THPRD in terms of our class registration is open. So we're offering a wide range of online opportunities and options. So you can visit our website and register if you're interested in those virtual classes. Another interesting piece of news that's very new for us is that Raleigh Swim Center will be opening. And that's on January 11th. So that's already passed. We're open, and a reservation for lap swim and used by aquatic affiliates. So under the current guidance, of course. So in other news, we are expanding preschool programs, which is really important right now. Beginning in February, we're expanding capacity of preschool programs at both Conestoga and the Nature Center. Also, mobile rec, the mobile recreation is back. So you can look out for those programs. That includes our nature mobile as well. You can visit the website to learn more about those if you're looking for those. You may also notice some construction happening at some of our facilities that are closed. We're basically using that opportunity to provide some upgrades to those buildings to make them more accessible for people experiencing disabilities. Another bit of news is that Teach PRD is continuing progress on fenced off-leash dog options, and Jackie Houston Dog Run was approved, and we're moving forward we had a recent pop-up at the Ridgewood Park, which is not super far, and the district's park and rec facilities advisory committees will be discussing making this a more permanent park feature. So if you're looking for dog runs, that's an option. We are doing a lot of bilingual work right now that's underway. So one example is that the district's expanded the virtual rec center model to include online centers for Spanish speakers. Another thing to mention is that volunteer opportunities are available. We've got plenty of volunteer options for people to help with outdoor work parties, garden cleanups, removal of invasive species. We're starting to pick those back up. So please sign up on our website if you are interested in those. And if you're just looking to get out, a couple options are we have drive-in bingo at the Stir Center. We've got all those calendar dates on our website. And then we have free fitness in the park, which is a great opportunity. So that'll be happening from now, mid-January to mid-March. And we really appreciate Washington County for their support on this because they've provided some grant funding so we could get some free programming going in our community while we're under the restrictions of the pandemic. So that's all the news from Teach PRD, and I'm happy to send that to you per usual, Adam. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free.
Could you send it to both of the emails in the chat box?
Oh, absolutely.
And thank you. Are there any questions for Liana from anybody? This doesn't have to be just board members. Okay. We'll see what we can do to publish those events that are anywhere near us. All right. Moving on with our agenda, we have a guest tonight from the police department, and Officer Barrett, if you would care to take this part of it over and do both your report and the bike patrol report. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Adam. Last month, there was a request and some questions surrounding some of the population, how we're serving them and services that we have. And I felt not the best person to give you guys that information. So before I give you my report, I'm going to introduce Sergeant Master Polito. I have invited him here, so I'm going to allow him to speak first. He can introduce himself, how long he's been with the agency, and then give you some good information about the bike team, their purpose and their role out in the community. And then he is going to save some time at the end for any questions. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to him, and then I'll close up with my stuff afterwards.
Thank you all for having me. Thank you, Dee. So I've been with Beaverton. I started there full-time in 2008, and I was a reserve prior to that from 2005. And I've been managing the bike team now. This is heading to year 2. The team consists of myself and 4 officers, and we're primarily tasked with the outreach component of the patrol division, dealing with the houseless and homeless populations, transients, those with mental illness and substance use disorders in the city. We've got some unique training, the officers and myself. There's certain case laws that dictate how and why we do certain things. One's out of Idaho, another one's out of Grand Pass, Oregon. Long and short of it, the courts decided that they felt it wasn't appropriate to punish someone for doing something that was merely a bodily function, such as sleeping. So someone just sleeping in the park, sleeping on the corner, the courts felt that that was something that shouldn't be punished because the folks had nowhere to go. So we've worked with that and kind of revamping the city's camping ordinance. This year, we've opened up 2 shelters inside the city. They're permanent, full-time. One is at the community center over on 5th, and the other is at LC Stir, and they're running through late March. Each one has approximately 25 to 30 folks in them at any given time. So we have seen a bit of an uptick of folks in the community, just looking for resources that are out here. And what my team does is we respond to all calls during the week, Monday through Saturday, relating to anything that's transit related or homeless related or mental illness, or people that seem to be in some kind of need in the community. And what we do is we start to kind of build a case file for these folks. We're trying to figure out what bucket, if you will, they fit in. We've got some folks that are just down on their luck. And we've been very, very successful in getting these folks off the street. We've gotten folks back in touch with family members. We've actually raised money for bus tickets to get folks to go back home. We've gotten some folks in touch with work, live to work resources where we've gotten them into low income apartments and working. We put them in touch with individuals that can help them with clothing and resumes. We've utilized a lot of things from Goodwill. Some of the local churches have stepped up to help us provide resources for folks. In the early pandemic, we were providing hygiene material to PPE as best as we could, and sanitation supplies to folks. Then we have our second bucket we look at, and those are folks that are really suffering from severe mental illness or severe substance use disorders or both. These are the folks that self-medicate on both their prescription and illicit drugs. These folks take a lot more time. They're the ones you may see, if you kind of see the same folks at the library, kind of sitting on benches or kind of mulling around. These are the folks we've been working with for quite a long time. It takes a good amount of resources to fine tune what they really need. We work closely with different outreach partners in the county. Just Compassion is one of them. Washington County Mental Health is another one. We've actually had folks come out from the Hawthorne Center to meet folks in the field. And we kind of work as that liaison because we start to build a trust in that community. And then there's a small element of folks out on the streets that are just a criminal element. And we deal with them according to the criminal law, and they get arrested and go to jail. But that's a very small component. I think the biggest piece we deal with right now are that center group of folks that are dealing with some kind of behavioral health or some kind of substance abuse issues. But we work with the Beaverton Community Court is working on a mental health court right now that we're a big part of. So we're starting to, I guess the long of it is, years past, the police would arrest someone for what we consider a nuisance crime, like offensive littering or disorderly conduct, put them in jail. They would spend a couple of days, they would get out and be in the same place. We're trying to break that cycle and try to figure out how do we put a platform under these folks to stabilize them. Understanding that they may never achieve complete independence in the community, but be much better than where they're at now. Get them on medication, get them in contact with either LifeWorks or one of the, any resources they need. It's basically what we're doing day to day. Do you guys have any specific questions or you want more detail on these things?
If I could just step in a moment, there is a Q&A box. If anybody would like to type a question, or in the chat box, you can type a question for those that cannot speak on the Zoom tonight. So for our attendees, you can type a question and I will read it for the officers. And I will start with one question. It seems that you have probably more advanced training than the rank and file officers on dealing with mental health issues. Can you describe like how long did that training take and what kind of I mean, I assume you're not ready for clinical work, but you're able to deal with someone who's having a mental health challenge in a different way than somebody that maybe just joined the police force.
Well, true. Some of my team have been through crisis intervention training. They've done a lot of training with de-escalation, and for the most part, most of the officers all of the officers on my team have been there more than 10 years. So it's a pretty tenured group that understand the criminal justice system and understand what we're looking to do. The thought of a mental health or a treatment court has been around for decades. So, myself and the officers have delved into what the theories are behind that to try to understand what best practices are as far as dealing with these folks. And we understand that it takes time. That's why we're a separate unit within the patrol division. We don't generally respond to calls that aren't houseless folks related or mental illness related. So we can take the time to build relationships. And then we work with I gotta admit, working with Washington County Mental Health and some of the other mental health providers, they've given us a lot of unique perspectives that we use. We build partnerships, and that's really why we're successful. But I didn't go to school for mental illness. I was actually an accountant before this.
Huh.
So
I think Officer Barrett wanted you to answer a question about evictions. To your knowledge, has BPD ever evicted someone from their residence? And we brought that up last month.
So yeah, in fact, I just had a seminar yesterday on an eviction moratorium coming through. So as long as I've been around, BPD has never evicted anyone from their residence for a couple of reasons. One, that's usually done through the county. So a civil deputy would be involved with that. The only way BPD would get involved is if there became a significant trespass component. But at this point, there's a lot of discussions as far as how long this rent moratorium is going to continue and how to unravel this whole eviction thing. It's a big issue because we're looking at, there's a good population of folks now that are just hanging on there. So there's a big concern that if people do start getting evicted here in the months ahead, we could have a booming homeless crisis here in the future. So folks are looking at it, trying to figure out how do you help, and it's really looking at the small landlords. The bigger companies can absorb a little bit of a loss for a time, but we're looking at the folks that have 1 or 2 units, and how do we subsidize? How do we help them and still help the tenant and not create bigger issues? But I guess long and short of it is we have never, that I know, evicted anyone.
Any other questions from the audience? Konnette has one.
Yes.
Yeah. I know that Hooper was closed.
Yes.
And I'm a nurse, and I've been put on observation duty before in the emergency room. I'm from another department. And my observation there is that little treatment actually happens in an emergency room. Is that what you're seeing? And my concern there is that some of the more psychotic clients are released maybe before they have had any treatment to get them through this episode. Are you seeing that as a problem of undertreatment happening in the community? So that
yeah, I would think to a point. I mean, especially with the restrictions of COVID, there's even less opportunities for folks to get into any kind of treatment facility. The jail's on limited capacity. Hooper's is shut down. Right now, we do our best to stabilize folks in the field and bring healthcare workers out when we can. Has been somewhat successful. We dealt with a gentleman today in crisis that we were able to get his care provider from LifeWorks to respond. We wound up transporting him at his request to St. Vincent's on a committal, but he's been off his meds for a week and was in a pretty rough spot. We know him. We know who his care provider was, so we were able to make that phone call. But we're really just becoming that safety net until hopefully things start to open back up and we can get folks into inpatient or limited inpatient treatment. or even as far as AA, we see a big bunch of alcoholism now on the streets, and it's a challenge right now.
I just thank you so much for being that person at that in that intersection of the client there, because I see it, you know, where there's so few resources, and I'm not sure how these people emerge from these episodes that they have, and it's very sad.
It's a challenge.
Do you have any other questions for the officer? I would like to ask one thing. The homeless are spread throughout the area, and you're on bikes. Is it like less threatening to them that you're on a bicycle versus in a police car? What is the reasoning behind a bike patrol doing homeless services?
So I'll give you a little history. Years ago, the bike team started out as the transit unit. This is probably a dozen years ago or so. And then when the TriMet division came and they had their own police, the department figured out what to do with the bike team. So then they dealt with a lot of the shoplifters for a while. And then transient, the sign holders, the folks flying signs or at the intersections of like 217 and Canyon, that became an issue. So the team kind of morphed then into dealing with those folks. So it's kind of been an evolution into dealing with the houseless and transient community. The reason we're on bikes is that we've always had a bike team. It's a little bit easier to navigate in some places on the bike. We're less threatening in some ways. We wear a slightly different uniform than say traffic or patrol. We do have a one patrol car with a bike rack and a van with a bike rack. So we can get to different parts of the city before we would deploy on bikes to be mobile. But it just gives us an opportunity to just be more present in the community. When we ride up into the park, we're 2 or 3 people riding up into a park on bicycles, and it's just, maybe they perceive us as less threatening, and maybe that's why it works a little bit different. But that's one aspect. It does give us a bit of a softer look than the patrol car.
And one of our community members asked, if the community wants to help and donate supplies to help you with your work, where would you direct them?
Dee, correct me. I think maybe Chaplain McGuire would be a good starting point.
I would say Chaplain McGuire or Consuelo Star.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to provide that information to you later, Adam.
Yeah, that would be great. We could put it in the minutes.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
And what kind of supplies are needed?
So in the wintertime, obviously it's all comfort items, hats, gloves, scarves, socks, hand warmers, coats. We've got a few coats that came in as the weather changes. So in the summertime, our guys will carry in the van food items, cold water, because a lot of these folks get dehydrated. Clean, just sanitation items, just kind of get them fresh from being out in the heat. In the wintertime, it's obviously more things to keep them warm. In the rainy season, we'll give like trash bags out, and it's just kind of it morphs into what the needs are. We just have we've got a little space over in one of the shopping malls where we just got a whole bunch of stuff. So we just if you can envision what the weather's like outside, like on a nice light like tonight, folks are doing pretty well. But the last week with the rain, folks were pretty wet. So we gave out a lot of Goodwill cards as a good one, because they can go buy clothes that they need. Shirts, pants, socks are a big thing.
And can you describe how COVID precautions have changed how you're working? And maybe this Officer Barrett could share that too.
Well, I think as far as the way we do, one thing, the jail shut down. And in some cases, a lot of times that was the only place we could send someone to get the beginning of some kind of help, because we could flag the person to get a mental health eval before they left. which kind of would get them into the system. A lot of the treatment facilities are shut down. A lot of resources have dried up for us. So for the most part, we've got folks that have absolutely nowhere to go, and we're just trying to figure out how to keep them afloat a little bit longer until things start to unravel. And we're hanging in there. I mean, it is some challenges. Sometimes these folks are, you know, like this gentleman today was off his meds. Sometimes they're off their meds and they're in crisis, and we've got to try to de-escalate it. And we've taken folks to the hospital. We've both St. V's, we've been out to Tualatin, we've been out to OHSU with folks wherever they're comfortable. Or we just sit there and spend a few hours chatting with them, bringing them down. So, Dee?
For us, with regards to the traffic team and COVID, a significant prohibitor is the DMV being closed. People can't get in to get their registration renewed. People couldn't get driver's licenses renewed. We've had a lot of kids that are taking driver ed classes through third-party vendors, are passing the physical driving test and are passing the written test, but they still only have that permit. They're not able to get into the DMV, or those third-party scores are not able to get over there to then turn their permit into a license. But there's that communication is getting broke down. So they're out driving with permits and no driving privileges, and now they're getting, quote, in trouble with potential tickets when they get stopped. Because of that moratorium, there's certain things that we can enforce that restricts, you know, parking things that we can do in the community, or unattended vehicles, or vehicles being parked on curbs for extended periods of time. Because of that, and because of, you know, the fact that a lot of people lost work, they lost income, you know, we don't feel that it's entirely appropriate to go out and hammer people with tickets. So we've hired and increased our threshold for a lot of that stuff. You know, we're focusing on things that are life safety. So excessive speed, running through stop signs, running through red lights, cell phones. We've kind of tailored what we're doing targeted towards those violations, and are kind of just letting everything else go right now. So that's how COVID has affected us on the traffic team.
How about masking and, you know, have the police officers been able to receive vaccinations and that kind of stuff?
So we're all required to wear masks. We fall under all the same requirements that you do, with the exception of incidences where what we are saying, it is vital that it is heard, then a mask can come down. That's the only reason why we should not be wearing masks. With that said, it's changed tactics a little bit. You might see that police officers are contacting drivers not at their driver's side, but at their passenger side, because it requires a little bit more distance between us. So the masks have changed the way that we do things, how we contact people. Yes, sometimes we do need a reminder. I was talking to a sign holder this week and I didn't have my mask on, and somebody drove by and said, "Officer, please put your mask on." Thank you. I appreciate the reminder, because we do forget. What was the second part of your question though, Adam? The last part? The vaccines. So vaccines just started getting rolled out to us this week. So approximately 24% of the Beaverton police officers that want to get the vaccinations got their first dose on Monday. I think it was Monday. There's a couple other clinics coming up. We are getting those vaccinations through a community partner. So whoever is wanting the vaccine does have the option to get that first dose.
All right, any other questions for either of them?
Yeah, so yesterday, I think it was, I heard a ton of sirens from what I assume to be police cars just zooming down. Maybe it was Hall. Do you know what happened yesterday that was like such a significant event, or if you're able to speak on that?
Sarge, do you want me to take that?
You know what it was?
You want me to take that?
Yeah, if you know what it was, you can take it. I'm looking at the log right now.
So while he looks at the log, I'll just forewarn you guys. You guys know that our new facility is right there at Hall and Allen. And yes, at any given time, there's probably a few bodies of us in the building at one time. And when a call comes out, we're going to be leaving either onto Hall or onto Allen to get to that location, just because those are our main arterials. So it may not be uncommon that you guys are going to hear a higher number of sirens than you did prior to when we were in the Griffith building. With that said, if Sergeant Master Toledo can find a call specifically for yesterday, he can give you that. But most of the calls we go on are at least a 2-officer response. So you're going to have at least 2 patrol cars going with different sounding sirens, hopefully, just so people can tell there's more than just one of us. That could be an ambulance, it could be a fire truck. Sometimes they blend together and sound the same.
There was a disturbance near Hall and Crestmore
Oh, that would have been it.
yesterday. One person taken into custody, no injuries that I can tell, based on the charges filed. So that might be it. That's the only thing I could see that would be time frame and the kind of call that would warrant lights and sirens. Everything else yesterday seems to be minor issues.
Oh, okay.
So probably that. I can only assume it was that, given the location.
Thanks.
Can you share a little bit about kind of what it is about your protocol that requires 2 squad cars for incidents, and kind of, is that on any
Sure.
incident, or?
No, I can speak to that. So we drive with each of our units has 1 person in the car, and the way the calls come in, they're prioritized through dispatch 1 through 5, essentially. So priority 1s are your most serious calls. Those are going to be your domestic violence calls, your assault calls. So anything happening now that is life safety. So that would definitely dictate a 2-unit response, because you would want someone else besides 1 officer responding to that call. And then it kind of scales back. Myself, I was on the road for many, many years before I started doing this. There were more calls than not I'd go to alone, or 2 of us would go to, just kind of slow. A disturbance, again, without reading the report, possibly a domestic situation. They're very volatile at times. More officers are killed at domestics than on any other call. So they would go with more than 1 unit, maybe 2 or 3, depending. I always tell folks, it's like the game of telephone. Someone calls the 911 dispatcher, who keys it into a computer. That then gets shot across the room to our dispatcher, who then dispatches it to the officer, who then reads it on a computer screen and makes a determination what the call is. So a lot of times the information we're getting is kind of third party. A lot of times, and Officer Barrett can attest to this, we'll get somewhere and be like, what's going on? This is absolutely nothing like the call said. Does that kind of answer your question, or can I clarify it in a little more for you?
No, it does. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, sure.
Anyone else have any questions for either of them? I'll ask one final question. RVs and motorhomes and like pseudo homeless park camping.
Yes.
It's my understanding that the Hillsborough Fairgrounds are shutting down the hosting for that. Are you aware of what other options there are for people, or what the city's telling people who are camping out in an RV or motorhome on city streets?
So the city does have an ordinance against camping RVs on city streets. We don't know where another location, kind of a general location, is going to be. One of the things we do, we've been pretty successful of dealing with the RV folks, because they're a little more stable than the folks that are truly out on the streets. We deal with them case by case. In some instances, they've needed repairs on the vehicles, so we've gone down to Napa and gotten things for them to get them along, because they don't, for the most part, they don't want to live at 22nd Hall forever. They want somewhere else to be. So we just try to find other options for them than the city street. Some of the churches around have allowed them to pull into their parking lots, and they can stay there as long as they want. It's private property. But with the fairgrounds closing down, we've seen some folks start camping up about 167th and Twin Oaks. We've had a big influx 170th and Merlot, there's a place we've seen folks camping from time to time. And then it looks like 173, 175 in Shaw, just outside the city, is another spot folks are going to with their RVs. But it's definitely it's a challenging issue because none of the tow companies will tow an RV. It's just too expensive. We've got issues with some folks dumping their gray water down the sewer, which becomes an issue. It's a big challenge when they start using motorhomes. I wish I had more answers for you, but we're struggling to figure it out ourselves.
Okay. Officer Barrett, did you have anything else you wanted to cover tonight?
I did have a couple of things. If you guys have nothing else for Sergeant Master Polito, I will let him get home and be with his family.
Well, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome, folks. Nice meeting you.
Thanks, Sarge.
You're welcome, Dee. Have a good meeting.
Just a couple things to go over. I apologize for not having the stats sent to you in advance. There was not a big difference in the stats this month from last month. If anything, there was some declines, which is worthy of note. Last month, there were 3 reported assaults from the neighborhood. This last month, there was none. So that number went down. There was an increase in fraud. I bring that up because it leads to obviously kind of this season of scamming and fraud. Tax season is upon us. Stimulus checks are coming out. We're already seeing people, get identity stolen, have checks cashed that they didn't cash, or they have people calling them and asking for money and then going and getting gift cards at stores in exchange for this money. The best thing that I can tell you guys to look for is that if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Don't do it. So we are upon the tax season. The scam that we see the most, I don't know if it's a scam or I'm not even entirely certain how it's being done, is that social security numbers are being stolen. You're filing your taxes, you go to file it, and it tells you that your social security number has already been put into the system. There obviously is ways to get around that. It's going to be time consuming. So I would encourage you that if you can file your taxes at the first available convenient moment, do it. We do see that it's the people that get kind of later into the season that run into that issue. The other one that was a slight increase was the larceny / vehicle theft. So I'm just going to encourage you guys, and I'm probably going to remind you several times and you'll get sick of it. Just keep your doors locked to your cars and keep all of your valuables out of sight. If they can't see it, typically they're not going to go looking for it. And if the doors are locked, they're going to go on to the next vehicle. They're looking for that easy access and that quick find. So just do your best to keep your doors locked. With regards to an email that I saw from you this week, Adam, through Miles, with regards to the illegal dumping, did you want me to touch on that at all, or?
Yeah, if you just want to tell us generally what you would do or recommend, or how that would be handled, that would be great.
Okay, so it's my understanding that email came from a complex that is within the neighborhood. Is that correct? Or how is the attachment from the neighborhood?
It's condos in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay, so the concept of the illegal dumping, yes, absolutely. It sounds like they did the right thing and they reported that. That is a crime, and that is something that we can look into. So if those names and addresses were in fact given to us, that's something that we can do. You're correct. I don't think that it is a code enforcement issue. It's a police enforcement issue. So as long as they are calling us and notifying us, if I have a name of John Doe at such and such street, and I can go and find them and say, hey, listen, condos don't necessarily want you arrested, but they do want you to stop throwing your garbage here. If it happens again, they're willing to press charges, then we can kind of go and look for that crime, that violation. So keep doing exactly what you're doing. It does need to come to us and not to code enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Officer Barrett? Or did you have something you wanted to bring up?
No, I think that's all I have. I don't want to steal any of Miles's thunder with regards to swearing in, so I'm going to let him take that.
Okay. One last thing, you mentioned earlier that you weren't enforcing as much the, I think, expired licenses and tags. Is that a secret, what the grace period is? Like people not making it through DEQ or making it into DMV to get a new license?
No, so it's either the DMV, or I want to say even the governor's office, that sends out a moratorium, essentially telling us that we cannot enforce those things. With that said, there are people that are trying to skirt that. So if I had a valid driver's license at the time COVID hit and it expired when DMV was closed, we are not issuing those people tickets. But if you never had driving privileges prior to COVID and you go out driving and you get stopped, those people are trying to fall under the, well, you guys can't write those tickets right now. Well, you've never had valid driving privileges, so we can enforce that. So it's for anything that happened as soon as the DMV's closed that you were not able to get in, get up to date, address changes and things like that, we're not enforcing. I did see the most current moratorium come down, and I want to say that that was March date. It keeps getting pushed out though. So right now we can't enforce, I think it's anything until March, and then it will have a backdated. So because DMVs have been open now with appointments, and yeah, it's still hard to get into, but it's appointments, they're saying, okay, so starting in March 1st, for example, anything within that last 6 months, we're not going to go ahead and allow you to write tickets for, but anything prior to that is fair game. So it's a pretty generous grace period. I think that internally, we're going to have some conversations about what the department's stance is on that. We're probably going to have some communication with our judges just to make sure that we're all on the same page so that we don't go out doing anything either excessively or not appropriate for the time.
And the courts are operating with the stuff you're charging.
Yes, they are. They're doing either kind of Zoom calls. You can call in for people that don't have the ability to do that. We have computers set up in the lobby of the courtroom, and then they're allowed to come in one at a time, talk to the court, talk to the officers, and take care of their business the way that they need to.
Okay. If there's no other questions for Officer Barrett, then I think we're done for now. And thank you for bringing the other officer.
I'm happy to do it. Anytime you guys have a topic, let me know. More people, the better. I like getting the knowledge out there.
All right. Now let's move on to the tree committee. Reggie, would you like to take over?
Sure. So the planting from November is pretty much wrapping up. We're moving forward into the tree giveaway event. So this is Sunday, January 31st from 1 to 3 p.m. at Beaverton Christian Church. We have received confirmation from the church that we can use their facility, which is great. I really want to continue to strengthen that partnership. As of now, we've had a pretty good response of interest. We don't have all 75 trees ordered, so ultimately we're going to purchase fewer trees than originally thought. We're going to continue to accept tree signups, 3 per household, through the indefinite future. So anybody who wants a tree can still get a tree with us. They just need to fill out the link. So don't have that on my screen right now, but you can visit the Facebook page for the neighborhood or go on Nextdoor if you're a member of that within the Highland neighborhood, and you can just find the posts that have been made. So our projected expenses for the event, the matching grant was approved in the fall, and we are looking at about $2,100 in budget. That's fallen due to the expectation that we'll be ordering fewer trees. So in addition to that, we've also received word from our nursery partner, Chehalem Mountain, who will be supplying the trees. We've gotten their estimate back for our kind of bid, their bid request. So in total, we're looking at a new outlook for the event of $1,136. And we're on the fence about whether or not we're going to provide mulch to people, just if we want to take on that added responsibility and cost. And then I decided to take off tree trunk protectors from the supplies list because many of the trees are going to be conifers and low branching. So those devices aren't really compatible with low branching trees. The purchase is going to be made within the next week or so of the trees. It'll be about $984. That could fluctuate a little bit between now and then, but that's about what it's going to be. So we're also getting 9 trees donated, at least as recently as November or December when I checked in about this. But a resident of Beaverton has graciously donated sequoias and incense cedars to the city of Beaverton, and they're being housed right now at a city facility. And my understanding is that we are able to accept these trees and incorporate them into our giveaway event. So that's really awesome.
Reggie, somebody typed a question in and it says, what types of trees will be offered and what size will they be?
Sure. Is this, you only have to answer this if yes, so I'm just curious. Is this Michelle on Whistling Way? Okay.
I don't know if Michelle can answer you verbally.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll assume it's not. Anyway, personal connection there. The trees will be 8 different species, and they're big leaf maple, incense cedar, giant sequoia, Douglas fir, Oregon white oak, shore pine, western hemlock, and Willamette Valley ponderosa pine. Oh, hi, Michelle. Okay. From the HOA. Perfect.
So Reggie, if you could drop your email in the chat box, maybe you and Michelle could start a dialogue that way.
Sure.
I also just put in the SurveyMonkey registration link to all panelists as well. So everyone should be able to see that. And that's how you can say that you want trees.
Perfect. Thank you, Annie, for posting that. It was difficult to multitask finding that. So for folks who may not have access to the chat, if you're watching this at a later date, it's surveymonkey.com/r/QQRBWVL. And you can contact highlandnactrees@gmail.com if you have any questions or difficulty signing up. So again, we're accepting signups into the indefinite future. If one of your preferred trees is out of stock, we'll let you know and coordinate on a substitution. And we're also looking for maybe a couple folks to help volunteer on the distribution day. It's going to be pretty straightforward, though. I don't expect more than maybe 24 folks coming by to pick up their trees, as many people have requested the full 3 tree allotment. But yeah, if you're interested in coming out and supporting the event, just email us highlandnactrees, all one word, @gmail.com, and we'll coordinate volunteer opportunities. Just 1 to 3 p.m. Sunday the 31st.
Reggie, have you done your budget approval motion previously for this, or do you need to do that now?
I want to say that we did it way back in September when the matching grant was approved with the said budget at the time, but I think just for good measure to kind of reaffirm the support to spend the money, I'm happy to put forth another motion now, just to kind of confirm that. So therefore, I would like to make a motion, or I would move to request the authorization to spend up to, let's say, $1,500 just to cover any potential unexpected expenses. So $1,500 to spend on the January 1st yard tree giveaway. Would anyone like to second that?
Is there discussion?
Discussion's after a second.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Okay, Konnette seconds. What's the balance of the checking account? Anna?
Yeah, so currently, and Reggie and I had a quick conversation about this before we started, because our current balance is only $1,379. But we do have that reimbursement that is coming from the city. And so if we do the 1,500 piece, it was going to be Reggie and I fronting the money for the purchases and then getting reimbursed once our balance is back up.
Yeah, and I just pulled 1,500 out of thin air. So if we want to shoot for something more realistic, like if, under whatever balance the NAC currently has, then I'm fine with that. That's a preference of anyone.
I was just wondering if we shouldn't reframe the question to, instead of cover any potential expenses, it would be for purchase of trees and tree planting supplies, right?
Yeah, trees and tree planting supplies. So other expenses that we have listed right now, possibly the mulch. We're going to continue that discussion. There's a tree delivery fee, social media, so Facebook for boosting posts. I don't know how much we've spent, but we have $40 allocated to that. And then just photos for any thank you cards, like photos taken at the event and then printed. So yeah, trees and event supplies.
Okay.
Further discussion on this motion?
My preference would be that if we can keep it to 1,100. So, because it looks like the biggest expense is going to be trees, and that's just under 1,000. And then that gives kind of a $100 of, additional miscellaneous expenses. And then that way it's within our current balance.
That's
what
good.
other people's thoughts are on that.
Reggie, do you accept that amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to accept the amendment of spending or $1,100. So I'll I'll make a new motion to
If you accept the amendment after the second, the friendly amendment, then we don't need a new motion.
Oh, perfect. Then yes.
So there's two amendments. It reads trees and tree planting supplies, delivery fees and miscellaneous. And then the amount is changed to $1,100 based on known expenses.
Reggie, do you accept Konnette's amendment to put the specific types of supplies in?
I accept Konnette's amendment.
Further discussion? All in favor from board members, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
In the judgment of the chair, the motion carries. Reggie, the floor is still yours. So if you want to continue.
Sure. Well, I'll wrap up the yard tree giveaway by saying, or just encouraging everyone to sign up and get trees. If you're already on the fence, I understand, but I really strongly encourage everyone. This is a great opportunity and it's free. Moving forward, I'm not sure what the 5 trees at Firgrove East Woods is on the agenda. Adam, what did you have in mind?
That was from you.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure why that's there, but we can go ahead and skip that.
And I reached out for agenda items that just got cut and pasted into what I sent Miles. So let's move on to the Indigenous naming.
Hey Reggie, it's Kate. I just was hoping I could mention what you and I had discussed.
Yeah. Would you like to talk about that?
Oh, sure. I had just have been noticing walking to and from in the neighborhood that one of the residents that graciously let us plant on their property during the November tree planting, it was an unfinished project. There was a repair needed and a sprinkler line on their parking strip, and there was 3 cones set out with the trees still. I can't remember if they took the trees or they left them there. But it's been a while, and it was through the holidays, and I still notice the cones out there. And I just really want to make sure that that resident's being taken care of, and that someone has followed up with them, and the repair is going to be made, and the trees will, be planted, and that will be finished for them. Because I'd hate for them to have, those cones out for such a long time and it not wrapped up. They're on 22nd in off Wilson.
Yeah, I agree, Kate. It's definitely something that I'm monitoring. Adam, would you like to speak more, or what would you like to say?
As far as the broken line, that has been turned over to the city, and there's a process with their risk manager that has to be followed. I am not sure why the trees are not planted. I think that's something we can take care of. But the guidance from the city was that they needed to call out their own vendor and submit a bill to the city. And that has been communicated to them. So Miles, if you have anything else to say, I'm not sure that we can say too much about it.
No, so the normal process is if you have a claim against the city, you go and have the repair made, and then bring the claim to the risk manager, and they evaluate it, and then either pay it or they don't pay it. I think in this case, there's a very good chance that they'll be reimbursed completely. I talked to the risk manager and I talked to the homeowner, so I'm not sure what the holdup is, or if they've had the repairs made. I don't know any of that.
That's all good. That's great. I just wanted to make sure someone was still in communication with the homeowner and they just weren't left, wondering what was
So
next.
did you say that the trees are not planted?
No, the cones are currently taking up the holes where the trees are going to be planted. I haven't seen the trees up in the parking strip.
Yeah, I'm waiting for any activity to change there. It has looked the same for 2 months. So as I walk by regularly, if I see something, then I will be inclined to reach out and offer assistance about planting. We have a core group of neighborhood volunteers who have been planting additional trees outside of the main volunteer event. So that won't be a problem at all. We just need to know when.
Thank you.
Do you want to take care of the Firgrove East agenda item, Reggie?
Sure. So I'll start by copying a link for a Google document. This is going to be to all panelists and attendees. The link is pretty long, so it's not really feasible to read it out loud, but if you want to have access to the draft of our resolution, you can go ahead and contact the NAC chair or myself, or you can use the Highland NAC trees email. So this is kind of something that I put together, drawing from examples around the internet of, kind of a way that we can formally indicate our support of the Firgrove East renaming to THPRD, and it kind of sums it up very nicely and it's formal. So I'll kind of go over the points. Basically, the Highland NAC finds as follows. We acknowledge the Atfalati as the the original inhabitants of the area. We acknowledge how the district just purchased the park and how there's no official name yet. We talk about how it is located within significant cultural resources as defined by as defined by the local Indigenous people. Talk about the naming catalog and the park district's efforts to develop that or redevelop it. We reference how we voted to make Native American history recognition a neighborhood priority during our visioning, how we're not aware of other THPRD properties that have Indigenous-based names. And we talk about how we voted to investigate the possibility of naming Firgrove East an Indigenous name. We reference our initial communication and outreach to David Harrelson, the Cultural Resources Department Manager of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, and his response. And then our two discussions in November and December last year of potential names. And instead of proposing names specifically, which was kind of a contested point of how we should approach this, I just talked about kind of the categories of different names that we talked about. So Otfalati place names, the various tribal historical figures, and lastly, endemic plants and animals in the language form of Otfalati and Chinook Wawa. Lastly, just reiterate our support for a slow, mindful, deliberate naming process that's defined by THPRD and its tribal community representatives. And then just lastly, a reference and nod to THPRD's goals in its naming policy, just to kind of tie everything together. So it's a lot. It's just 2 pages. I'm seeking feedback on minor edits or major revisions from the public right now before we go back to the drawing board, apply those changes, and then I'd like to in February come back together and then have an official NAC board vote to whether or not to send this resolution to THPRD, like the board of directors, and then CCing like Doug Menke, the THPRD general manager, Liana, David Harrelson, and other stakeholders that we've been involved with thus far or that we're aware of. So at this point, I'd like to turn over the discussion to all of our membership, and I'm happy to hear any thoughts on all of this.
I just want to say thanks for taking the time to write this. It's really thorough, and I think it's a good summary of our discussions so far in a way that seems more in line with kind of what our role as a neighborhood association should be in this kind of discussion. And I guess I am also curious at some point if, Liana, you could maybe weigh in of, because you led us in that discussion last time, and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I would be happy to chat a bit. I really appreciated that Reggie sent this on to me, so I had an opportunity to take a look at it. And I think that I just deeply appreciate, and I'm sure that the district appreciates you all calling out some of the work that we're doing and how this coordinates or fits in together with the work that you all are committed to too. So I don't have a lot to say about it, but I was able to take a look at it and review it, and just really appreciate that opportunity to do that.
So Leanne, sorry.
Are you
Go ahead.
aware of other organizations passing resolutions and what the appropriate landing place is at THPRD? Is it the executive director? Is it board members? Is it a committee? That kind of targeting information?
Oh yeah, good question. So I would say that typically like what I would recommend is probably if another organization were interested in this work, maybe another NAC or CPO, to again, like I'm happy to be that first connection to help provide support in the process and help connect people to the work that we're doing. And then ultimately, where this kind of resolution would go is it would be Doug, would be the general manager. And you can do that directly. I can do that, or you can do it directly. Either way is totally acceptable. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think that helps.
Okay, good.
So right now, given the pandemic, do you think it would be most appropriate to send a letter like of this in the mail, or should it be done by email? And if it's done by email, will it have the same weight and gravity to it?
Oh, that's a good question. I can say very positively that when we receive any kind of communication via email versus in a printed letter, we take them all very seriously. So we typically don't take a printed letter any more or less seriously than an email, and vice versa. So if it's convenient for you to send an email, what we would typically do is probably scan it anyway as soon as we got it in, if it were a physical letter, so that it could be shared and looked at within the district for those discussions. So if my recommendation would probably be to email that. And then on the other hand, of course, if you wanted to send a letter, there's no problem with that as well. Like even with our pandemic, that would be a totally acceptable way to do it.
Okay, thanks for your input. I guess we'll talk internally about how to do that, or what we prefer. Thank you.
Of course.
Anything else on this topic? We'll consider this the first reading, and then we can do a motion next month.
Yeah. If you have any suggestions, get them to us in time for the next meeting, February 11th, and I'll incorporate those into the final draft, and then we'll vote on it.
Sorry, I guess I have one question. I am happy to share this on social media if we think that it would be helpful to get more neighborhood input, or if we think that this is enough, we can also do that way. I just kind of wonder how much we should be.
My experience with resolutions from other organizations is that they are best written by committee and not written by random people on the internet.
That's where that's kind of what I was leaning towards as well, but I just wanted to kind of bring that up. Sounds good.
Reggie, any more on this topic?
I would say, I think that's everything, except do we need to have a formal vote to make the vote for an adoption of this for next month's meeting on the agenda? Or is this good enough?
I'll put it on the agenda for you.
It's in the minutes as it going on the agenda too. So
okay, so
good job, Reg.
Cool. So I'll just make a motion next meeting, then we'll have our formal vote, and it'll be on the agenda to alert the public.
One of the folks who's on the phone just unmuted. I think they would like to speak. The phone number ending in 0528, would you like to speak?
Well, I just wanted to say that I thought Reggie did a very good job on this. I read it on the internet, and I was very impressed.
Thank you, Juanita, and we're glad you're with us.
Thank you.
You ready for Konnette? Reggie?
Yeah.
All right, Konnette, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. Well, for the BCCI, we had a leadership meeting actually last night where representatives from BCCI and the NACs met, and Miles led the meeting as a kind of an annual review. The big thing we're working on is re-looking at the land use information, and there is a smaller group that's going to be working on what parts of it might need to be updated, what kind of education for the NACs might be needed, and what kind of resources can be available for the NACs related to the land use and our role in that. So there are currently on the NAC resource page, there are currently some resources there about land use and engagement, community engagement in that process. And if you're unaware, the NAC does have a role in development projects that occur into the neighborhood, especially if they are within 500 feet of our neighborhood association. So I would suggest that we go to that resource page, and I can put that in the minutes, link in the minutes. And it's a opportunity to participate in our local development, and I found it very interesting. I'll keep you updated on what happens with that. There you go.
And I just wanted to thank everybody for how much we have done, because we seem to be one of the more active NACs in terms of like having things that other NACs want to do that we've done. And I'm also happy to report that despite COVID, our activity level seems to be about normal. And that is unusual for the other NACs. So we appear to have some information to share and some processes to share with the other NACs that would be beneficial to them, especially the tree planting activities. And thank you for everyone who attended.
Yeah, I want to say, like, with our NAC, I have an unusual amount of experience and insight with organizing tree planting events, and I recognize that sort of event is not always accessible, or it's rarely accessible to other neighborhoods. So I think to really spread tree planting equitably across the city, we should be advocating citywide for a planting program that allows every resident, even for maybe apartment complexes or commercial properties, to sign up to get trees planted in the right of way or in the yard. And this would be a subsidized city service. This is offered in many other cities around the area, like Portland and Vancouver, Oregon City, Gresham, Wilsonville, Milwaukee. So, basically it would allow the NACs to really focus on just supporting the outreach and helping with logistics on the planting event day, as opposed to having to build everything from scratch. There would be other organizations that would be contracted to do that work, that planning, that overview of work that would be done. So therefore the NACs could just focus on getting the word out, engaging their neighbors, and kind of being the boots on the ground force. So that's what I would say to other neighborhoods or other folks who are interested in tree planting who might be tuning in.
One of the things that we heard at the meeting last night was there's a high degree of interest in NACs doing cooperative events. And I think this year would be a good year to maybe offer that, to extend our hand to another NAC for a cooperative event of some kind.
That would be awesome. I know when I posted about our shredding event on Nextdoor, I've made it accidentally, so it was available to more than just people in Highland. And people were like, wait, I didn't find out about this. This seems really great. And so it was one of those things where I kind of responded and said that they should reach out to their own individual NACs. But yeah, I think I second that idea of wanting to do a cooperative event. I think that would be really cool.
All right, I think we should keep it moving and have Miles take over and give his city updates. I did ask Miles a few things to include in his updates from emails I received directly from members of the community, and those are on his agenda there. So Miles, if you're ready.
Yeah,
floor
thanks,
is
Adam.
yours.
I guess the easiest way to do it, Adam kind of sent me some broad categories like noise ordinance. It's actually pretty lengthy in the city code. So if there's kind of something specific you were thinking of or wanted to focus on, otherwise I can just talk about.
Oh, that was mine, Miles.
Yeah.
Is there, it had specifically with noise, what time noise began in
Yeah.
a neighborhood?
Officer Barrett is still here as well. If she knows anything about this.
Denisha, do you know? It's Denise, right?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. Miles, is it 10 p.m. to 5?
So it depends.
Yeah.
If it's construction noise, it's 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But if you're doing construction on your own home, it's 10 p.m. or later. And really, I think what the practice is if a neighbor
10 a.m.
in the AM.
Yeah.
If a neighbor, my first recommendation would be to go talk to your neighbor and be like, hey, you're starting this noise too early. Could you hold off until 7 a.m.? In a cordial manner. I've done that before in my own neighborhood and it's worked out great. If you call the police, I think if they have time and they can come out, they're just going to ask them to probably knock off what they're doing until 7 a.m. And Officer Barrett can correct me if I'm wrong, but the same in the evening. If somebody's having a loud party and the police show up, I think they generally ask them to quiet down before they start issuing tickets for for being too noisy. I've certainly been at parties before where the police have shown up and asked us to quiet down and then come back and told us again. And I think the second time was enough to make sure that we did.
Yeah, I know. I'm just, it's helpful to know what time. 9 a.m. is fine for me, but
yeah, it's 7 a.m.
It's 7 a.m. for construction noise.
Yeah, let me.
And some of it has to, I think that there are, like when they take a tree down or something, they frequently start pretty early. And some of the, a lot of the landscaping people are using high speed blowers. And so that's pretty noisy.
Yeah, and the way it reads is it's got to be offensive noise. And that's not really clear what that means. It's not like there's a decibel level that you can't go past. So what you may find is an offensive noise somebody may enjoy. And I think the best thing to do is just talk to your neighbors first. And then I think the mediation program at the city is another great resource if you want to have a third party kind of talk through both.
I think it's different. You know, it changes. Sometimes it's a single I don't know. I mean, I'm not planning. I just kind of was wondering, like the HOAs are pretty good about, probably because their HOAs will complain to the landscaping people when, and so they start a little later.
Yeah, and the HOAs in their CCC and ours can they can dictate kind of that agreement on what time noises can start, because it's a civil matter. So I'm sorry, it's not a very good answer.
Is is stuff with the noise ordinance code enforcement or police usually?
It's
I think I've seen code go out and handle it. Barking dogs. I don't know if you can hear my dog barking right now, but that's another one that comes up a lot, and they do go out and enforce that one. They'll go out and sit in their car, and if they can hear the dog barking for a certain amount of time, within a certain time period, they'll issue them a warning and then a citation, and they get those resolved eventually.
And that's with code enforcement?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think Officer Barrett just tried to say something.
just that some of it's both. Some of it's code enforcement, some of it falls under ORS. A lot of the complaints we're getting right now are the aftermarket mufflers on cars going through neighborhoods. That again is offensive noise, unnecessary noise. The people that regulate that is actually the DEQ. And this is all something I've learned as well. So the DEQ, when you take your car in to get the DEQ check, they're also supposed to be checking for noise. Right now, they're not doing that. So we do have a gentleman in another community that is collecting data, and he plans to confront DEQ with this information so that they start retesting for it. But that is a ticket that law enforcement can write. So we are trying to come up with ways that we can sit in certain areas, have officers placed in other areas, and start pulling these people over, having conversations with them. Again, trying to start with warnings before we issue citations. But some of them are extremely loud and offensive to ears. Most people do not find that enjoyable.
It's true. Some of the other things so I started reading the entire code. I've read it multiple times, but I feel like every time I read it, I see something new. Some of the things that maybe you're not aware of, the city code is there to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the city residents. And parts of the code are also there to protect urban blight and protect property values. So if there's a house in your neighborhood, they have to have water, electricity, sewer, and garbage services. They're all required for habitation. So I brought that one up because if the house that's dumping the garbage at the condo doesn't have garbage service, code enforcement can go out there and make them get garbage service. Another one I saw, hoarding and unsanitary conditions are prohibited. So the code officers used to sit right next to me for like 12 years before they got kind of shuffled around. And so I'd hear all their phone calls, and there's quite a few hoarding cases, and they're really tough to work on and really tough to get people to let go of their stuff. And they're a huge problem for the neighborhood for fire reasons and for like rats and all kinds of stuff. You don't see it. A lot of times it's behind closed doors, but it is out there.
So we should be reporting known hoarders, even if it doesn't, like, I know where one is. I know she's hoarding, but I don't know her.
Should is the right word, but it's not safe for them or the neighborhood to be hoarding materials in their home, or garbage or refuse.
Okay.
It's their safety is really at risk. What about fences? So if your neighborhood, if you build a fence in your yard or it came with the house, you're required to maintain it and keep it upright. Can't tilt more than 15 degrees. And all the boards have to be there. And you only have like a week to get it fixed. So I just mentioned that we had a big windstorm, and my backyard fence actually is now tilting like 30 degrees. So I'm going to go out and fix it tomorrow. Let's see. I mentioned sidewalks. This is always a big one in neighborhoods. If you own property and you have a sidewalk in front of your house, you're responsible for maintaining it. That includes removing snow and ice within 4 hours of daylight. Also includes no more than, it's a ½ inch lift between panels or cracks. And if it's caused by street trees, there is a program that the city would cover half of the cost of replacing it. But if it's just normal wear and tear, the homeowner is responsible for keeping those safe. And if somebody trips and hurts themselves, you as the homeowner are liable for could be liable for the damages.
Are there any resources for homeowners who are struggling, especially with COVID, on that sidewalk repair stuff?
So if it's caused by street trees, there is a grant program. If it's just that you don't maintain, you haven't been able to maintain your sidewalk, there's no program. I don't know that code service goes out. I guess what eventually would happen, especially if it was dangerous, is the city would go out and fix it, and then put a lien against the house for the cost. Which is unfortunate also. Also, Reggie knows this, but you can't cut down trees in the right-of-way, in the public right-of-way. They're the public's trees, but you're responsible for maintaining them. So if they die, you have to get a permit to cut them down, and then you have to put them back.
That also includes, if I may, you can't grind roots of street trees. You have to consult with the city and make sure that that's permitted. That's considered destroying the tree, as well as topping the tree. So you can't indiscriminately prune the limbs back to stubs or anything that's going to essentially destroy the tree structurally, or cause it to slide into poor health, with the major wounds being incubators for fungus or insects. I would say if anyone is wondering about street trees, contact the city's arborist, Jared Lane, and he can advise you.
And then the other big one, I'm sorry, Reggie.
Oh, I was just throwing in a phrase that's thrown around a lot. Call before you cut.
I've not heard that. Another one that we hear a lot of complaints about are vehicles parking in front of my house. I'm sure Officer Barrett's heard that before. My neighbor parks in front of my house. Go tell them to stop it. The streets are public, and your neighbor can park in front of your house as often as they would like to. There are rules about how long it can sit there, and it can't have an expired tag. It has to be able to run. Can't have flat tires. And it has moss growing on it, like it hasn't moved in a long time. That's when code services and the police department both enforce that. And they'll tag it and eventually tow it away. I think 72 hours is the maximum length you can have a car parked on the street and not move. And that's when they go out and they chalk the tires. So you might see white marks on the tires one day. Move your car a little bit. That's what I had on code, unless there's any other questions. Nope. Okay. Let me see if I can share my screen, Adam. I have you had an update about the reservoir. Um, so Brian Barnett, the project manager, sent these over. They're doing a lot of work getting that ready. You can see they're really close to some of the neighbors. They actually got just as a side note, this just came in. One of the neighbors wrote a really great letter about how respectful everybody's been being on the site, and that the dump trucks are driving really slowly through the neighborhood. So we're really glad to see that. So if you ever have a complaint about a city project in your neighborhood, let me know, and we'll get it taken care of.
I have a question about the reservoir, if
Yeah.
it's a good time.
Yeah.
I haven't been up there, but it looks like there was probably some tree removal, big Douglas firs and others, maybe some cedars. Do you know to what extent the city will be replacing trees up there, specifically large evergreen species?
I can ask.
I think that's going to be very important. Looks like
Yeah.
it was very.
As long as it doesn't interfere with all the underground equipment that'll be on the site,
Yeah.
I can almost guarantee that they'll replant.
My biggest concern is if replanting does occur, that it will be like small trees like dogwoods and little maples that aren't going to provide the same mitigation in the long term that large Douglas firs, ponderosa pines, sequoias, redwoods, that sort would provide.
Yeah, Reggie, I can send you Brian Barnett's email and you can send your concerns to him.
Okay, thanks.
Because that probably hasn't been decided yet.
All right.
I know that we're building a new reservoir on top of Cooper Mountain, and I don't think we had to remove trees, but we're doing a lot of planting as a screen of big evergreen trees so that you can't really see the reservoir from the roadway.
That would be great. Cooper Mountain has experienced some major deforestation in the last 2 years, like 175th and Kemmer. So any screening that we can do up there on city property with large evergreen species, not Leland cypress or stuff like that, little junipers or whatever, but real big trees.
They're Douglas firs, I think.
Okay, that's very encouraging to hear.
And that property you're talking about is outside the city.
I know I think it's in the Cooper Mountain Summit planning area for the city. So that was maybe the county that let that happen.
And then just a quick rundown on the timeline for the pump station. They're in the middle of demolition. January, they're going to have 100% plans for approval by the city building and electrical permit, so kind of phase 2 work. February, we'll negotiate the maximum price we'll pay. Council will approve that. And then March to mid-April, they're going to demo existing Sorrento and pump stations, and start buying some of the equipment that takes longer. It's made to spec, so it takes longer to get. And then May to June they're going to start new construction. And April 2022 is when it should be complete and operational. I'll just mention the city has a very robust water system. You're lucky to live in the city and have city water. In case of a prolonged drought or an emergency, there's multiple ways for the city to deliver water to residents. And these reservoirs and pump stations that are kind of in the ground, I think Brian told me, this was a few years ago, we brought more on, that they store enough water in the ground to meet the needs of the city for 3 to 4 months without having to have any water from Bull Mountain or from Hag Lake enter the system. So it's pretty resilient. Adam, what else? There was something else on the agenda, signs. I wasn't sure what that was about.
The outdoor A-frame signs, Konnette brought that up.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna order the some stick-on signage to go on those A-frames, and you can put those out a week before the meeting to let people know that they're on Zoom, and the website to go to, and also if you do start meeting in person again, how to, next Tuesday at 7 p.m. The A-frames are a great way to let people know, and I hear so many people say, "Oh, I came to the meeting because I saw the sign." So.
Is there
Thanks, Miles.
anything else we need to know about the city?
Just real quickly, you have a new city government, new mayor, 2 new city councilors were sworn in, and Mark Fagan was sworn in for his 3rd and final term. There's 1 vacant city council position, and that will be on the May ballot for a special election. We have an interim city manager who's trying to work, who is working with the city council and staff to kind of navigate what this new form of government looks like and how it actually works functionally.
What's his name, Miles? Oh, I had to ask. Sorry, I'll just.
I just had it in my head too. Kurt Wilson? I think it's Kurt Wilson.
He was the one that was from Riverside,
Oakland.
There was a nice question and answer video session that was hosted with the managers that they were interviewing, and I attended it, and my questions got asked. And when they try to hire the permanent one, that was a nice community involvement. I know it's a big decision for the city, but it was nice to hear, particularly Rick's answer on anti-corruption. I asked a question, and that kind of brought out the stories.
So there'll be more opportunity for public engagement when we hire the full-time city manager. So start thinking now what you want to grill them with, Adam. I expect some good questions from the NACs. And you'll start seeing information about that coming out soon. They're developing the plan right now.
Is there anything?
That's all I have. If there's any questions.
Miles, there was a consultant hired for the 8 Can't Wait police department reform package. And I haven't heard any engagement, or maybe somehow I missed that.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about what's going on with that consultants and what the process is?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things going on. The consultant delivered their report to City Council a couple of months ago. And that report talked about the needs, some recommendations for City Council on how they can move forward. And then the Chief of Police and the Human Rights Advisory Commission have been meeting pretty often. I don't know if it's monthly or bi-monthly, to discuss a bunch of different issues and try to reach, generate some ideas and reach consensus. They're getting ready to report what their work is to the City Council. It's not on the agenda yet, but I did hear them talking about it was almost complete. And a City Councilor, Mark Fagan, sits on that committee with them to discuss 8 Can't Wait. So more's coming.
I had thought that Kate Arnold said that the council had not authorized the adoption of the 8 Can't Wait. Are they looking at just pieces of it then?
From what I understand, on 8 Can't Wait, the city meets all the practices in maybe not exactly the way they're worded in 8 Can't Wait, except the use of force. Gosh, how did it go? It's 8 Can't Wait, like, says this is the point when you can use not excessive force, but force.
Force when there's a life at stake. I think that was maybe Officer Barrett knows, but I think you're right. I think that it did include the use, being able to use force when
It's
there's
deadly force.
a life at stake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically what the chief said, I heard her say this multiple times, is they can't tell the police officer not to fight back if their life's in danger. And that wasn't good policy for our police department. And so that's kind of where the hang up is. And I think the conversations they're having with the police department and the Human Rights Advisory Commission and the guests that they're inviting to those is more about relations between the police and the public and different communities and how they can improve those perceptions, all kinds of things. They've covered a lot of ground. I'm happy to, if you get the Friday update, I'm sure when they release the report, it'll be in there and you can read it.
Officer Barrett, can you answer a little bit? Because I also thought that there was some discrepancies between 8 Can't Wait and how the Beaverton Police Department policy was around shooting at moving vehicles and moving targets. But I may be mistaken on that. If you could clarify that a little bit.
No, and that's a loaded question. The topic of use of force has obviously been a very prominent topic within the community and the nation over this last year. Specifically with shooting at moving vehicles, our policy has outlined that shooting from vehicles and at vehicles has been proven to be ineffective. But what a lot of this is leaning back to is as a last resort, if that is what is necessary and we are justified to do so. They don't want to take away our right to do it or to implement or use that tool. So I know that the chief, the city council, the Human Rights Advisory Committee has been having good discussions with why our policy says the certain things that it says. I know that we've invited training officers, and I think Officer Shaw has taught or spoken on a couple of things. Sergeant Shaw now has spoken on a couple of the topics as to why things are the way that they are, and just trying to make sure that the education is there on both sides of the fence so that, you know, we're not just saying this is the way it needs to be because this is the way it needs to be this way. It's this way for these reasons. So education is going to be a prominent piece in a lot of use of force, but specifically the 8 Can't Wait topic.
Miles, did you make it through all the city updates?
Yeah, that's enough for me.
And in the other meeting, you shared where the home for your organization in the city is.
Oh, sure.
And I think that might be something relevant you could share here.
So we were in the mayor's office. So the mayor was my department head. And that's no longer the case. We are a separate department, just like the police are a department, finance is a department, public works is a department. We're the community services and public engagement department. We have a department head, it's Abigail Elder. She's the former library director for the city. And she's been kind of in that role for a couple of years now, but this is a more formal arrangement of it. So Mayor Beatty has an office. She has a staff member and a couple of staff that report to her. But Mayor Doyle, under the last charter, all the city department heads reported to him. He could hire and fire department heads. The mayor doesn't have that power anymore. That lies with the council and the manager, city manager. And this will all probably change when we get a longer term city manager. I don't know. It's a very interesting time. I'm a little remiss that I don't get to say I work in the mayor's office anymore. I feel like that had some clout. I could like call up the chief and be like, hey, the mayor said to do this and now I can't. So it's a little bittersweet.
All right. We are right at our adjournment time. We're a little over it. Is there anything last minute from board members to bring up before we adjourn? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye,
Have a good
everyone.
night.